Welcome back to Basic Language Learning 1, getting to know the different elements of a sentence. This is lesson 2, parts of speech. Now, in the previous lesson, we learned the structure of a sentence. We learned how to identify subject, verb, object, and we remembered this knowledge for future videos. After this lesson, you should know the different parts of speech. You should be able to identify the different parts of speech, and you should be able to use this knowledge in future videos. Now, what exactly are parts of speech? So do not confuse these with figures of speech. That's something completely different. Parts of speech are what words have what function in a sentence. Now, I want you to look at these names and see if you recognize them. Right, so if you recognize them, great. Then I want you to pause this video and write these words down with a definition for each of them underneath. Doesn't have to be a fancy definition. Explain it to a 2-year-old, okay? Otherwise, if you don't know the definition, keep listening. So a noun names a person, a place, or a thing. A verb is a doing word or an action word that shows you are currently doing something or what you have done before. An adjective describes a noun, and an adverb describes the verb. I always remember it this way. The adverb adds to the verb, and then the adjective adds to the noun. Let's look at nouns. Now, there are many different kinds of nouns you can look at. And once again, if you are familiar with these words, then I want you to pause this video and write down your own definition for these words. If you don't know the definition, keep watching, but then do write it down in your workbook so that you can memorize it. Right, so we said that a noun names a person, a place, or a thing. A common noun names any kind of person, place, or thing, nothing specific, like table, chair, house. It doesn't refer to anything specific, like your house or your table. And then a proper noun names a specific person, place, or thing. These would be things like your name, your country, the province or the state that you live in. Right? And then also the important names of maybe landmarks around you or your school's name. All of these are proper nouns. Proper nouns are written with a capital letter. I know it's not written there, but if you think you're going to forget, write it down. Proper nouns are always written with a capital letter. Abstract nouns are things that you can't really see or touch, like a person or a thing or a place. It's more something that you feel. It's more your feelings, like love and hate. And then a collective noun is in the name. It collects many things together. And all of these nouns are either singular or plural. Then we mustn't forget, what is the word that describes the noun? If you said adjective, then you are correct. An adjective adds to the noun. It paints a fuller picture. For example, beautiful Jane, big table, broken down house. All of this adds to our understanding of the noun. Now let's look at verbs. I hope you wrote the nouns down. If you didn't, go back and write them down in your book. I want you to memorize them before we look at verbs. Now, we said a verb is a doing word. It's an action that you complete. Okay? Like we learned in our previous lesson, subject, verb, object, the verb is what is happening in the sentence. And this is no different. That is always the case with the verb. And just like a noun, there are many different kinds of verbs. Now, before we can even think of knowing what these verbs are, I want you to write them down in your workbook. Pause this video if you have to. I want you to write them down, and if you already know the definitions, write those down and we'll compare later, and if you don't, keep watching. So verbs have many different kinds, just like a noun. We get phrasal verb, which is a combination of an adverb and a preposition. Once again, I want you to write these down. Reflexive, which is used with a pronoun to indicate that the object is the same as the subject. And then we have reciprocal, which is two people or groups doing the same thing to each other. Ergative is when a verb is both transitive and intransitive. And then auxiliary is used to form tenses, negatives, and questions. So, I'm not too worried about whether or not you can actually identify these in a sentence right now. However, I do want you to memorize these meanings because they will come in handy with more advanced courses. Let's look at an example for each of these. So, a phrasal verb, remember we said it's a combination of a verb and an adverb or preposition. For example, break out, fall for, add on. A reflexive verb is used with a pronoun to indicate that this object is the same as the subject. Now, this is where your previous knowledge comes in. For example, I found myself lost. Or he hurt himself playing rugby, right? So our subject is the same as our object. And the verb are the things that affect the object. Remember that. Reciprocal is when two people or groups are doing the same thing. For example, they hurt each other and they are fighting one another. So they're doing the same thing essentially. Ergative is when a verb is both transitive and intransitive. This one's a little bit more difficult to spot, but as you go along in your courses, as you advance along, you will find this easier to spot. For example, I broke the glass. Okay, broke being your verb. I caught my dress, caught being your verb. And then auxiliary, I said, is used to form tenses, negatives, and questions. You might use an auxiliary verb so much already without even knowing. And then, of course, we can't think about the verb without thinking about the adverb, which describes the verb. Once again, it gives us a clearer picture of the action being performed. It tells us how, where, how often, how much it is done, and to what extent. This is all what an adverb is. So I want you, before we continue, to think of any other parts of speech that we did not talk about now, and I want you to write them down at this minute. Even if you're not sure of the definition, write them down now. These are ones that I want you to, just for the purpose of this video, to know and to remember for future lessons. A pronoun replaces a noun. Preposition shows position, it's in the name. And an article shows whether something is definite or indefinite. Now I want you to write these down and remember the definitions of them as well. And make sure you write down the example as well. Now let's put all of our knowledge to work. We are going to analyze a sentence, and I want you to identify all the different parts of speech. So write this sentence down in your workbook, and then I want you to, underneath each word, write down what it is. Pause this video, give yourself as much time as you need, and go through the sentence with all of the parts of speech we just learnt. Right, so we're back. Now, let's look at the sentence. Jane is a proper noun because it names something specific. Runs is a verb because it shows the action. And if you want the tense, it's in the simple present tense. Through is the preposition because it shows us where it is happening. The is a definite article referring to a specific noun, which is what the sprinkler is. Sprinkler is a common noun. On is a preposition. It shows us what particular day. And then we have an indefinite article. It's not referring to any specific day. It wasn't June 24th or October 1st. It was any summer's day. And we are describing the day. It is hot and it is a summer's day. Both of those are adjectives. And then we get to the last one. It's a common noun. It names any day out there. It's not Christmas Day or St. Patrick's Day. It's not a specific day. It is anyone. That is why it's a common noun. And all of these elements together make up a sentence. Now, how did you do? Could you manage to name all of these? Did you go into more detail than I did? If you did, great stuff. Now, I want you to do a few self-study examples. These are the same as from the previous video, except now we are not looking for subject, verb, object. We are going to write each sentence down and then, like we did in the previous slide, name each part of speech. That is what I want you to do now to practice what you have just learned.